Do you believe that it is possible for our loved ones to be able to send us signs from beyond? Or do you think when individuals report seeing these signs, it's nothing more than a coincidence? In this video, I'm going to explore the phenomena of signs from beyond. I'll talk about what the different signs are. I'm going to share with you my own personal experience with them, and I'll let you be the one to decide whether you think it's a coincidence or you think it is a sign. And I'll tell you at the end what my thoughts are on it, and you're definitely going to want to stay to the end because I'm going to go from the ordinary type stuff all the way up to the super bizarre, and I'm going to tell the story of this duck, and I'll let you decide for yourself in this photo, am I crying or am I laughing? And you'll find out that answer at the end of this video. My name is Debbie Morton, and my husband passed on June of 2022, so it's almost been 2 years. I am currently traveling the world as a nomad, and I guess you could call it a digital nomad, and I invite you to travel along with me. You can hear my stories of travel through grief, travel around the world, and I am also a home-based entrepreneur, and I share a few insights on that as well. I invite you to hit that subscribe button, and you'll always be alerted whenever I post a new video. I'm going to share some stories of the signs that I was observing in the months after John passed away. The first one is the number 1, and you'll notice on my YouTube channel I am Debbie Morton 111. The ones actually started several years before John passed away. In fact, here is a Facebook post because I wasn't into a lot of the metaphysical or woo-woo, as I would call it, but I started seeing ones everywhere, more than just a coincidence. And so I posted on my Facebook page one day after seeing a bunch of ones and then driving home from an event where I had just invested $20,000 into a mastermind program. I noticed that on my Facebook page, I had just hit 1,111 friends, and I arrived home at 11, actually it was 1:11 in the afternoon. And so several people on that post educated me around angel numbers and what they mean, and ones mean that you're on a new path. So I started seeing them several years ago, and I've continued to post whenever I see a lot of frequency of ones. After John passed away, it went through the roof. Like, I saw ones everywhere. And some of the more bizarre things, I was coming home from the airport. It was about 1 in the morning, and I looked at my GPS, and I would be driving into my driveway at 1:11 in the morning. I think I was 11 minutes away at the time, and I just happened to glance down at my odometer. How often do you look at your odometer? And the odometer said 11,111 miles. And I was so grateful I was driving at 1 in the morning. There was no one else on the road, so I could take a picture of it. So the ones started showing up again after John passed away. And I'm curious, do you think it is a coincidence or is it signs from beyond? The next thing people see a lot is money, specifically pennies. Have you ever heard the saying, pennies from heaven? I find a lot of pennies. This actually was before John passed away as well. But I want to share with you something that happened that involved pennies, and actually it was 11 cents. And I'll let you decide, is this a coincidence or is this a sign? John had planned a trip for us to go to St. Martin 3 weeks after he passed, and we were going to be going with another friend of ours. And so I decided to go on that trip. I can either grieve at home or I can grieve on the beaches of St. Martin with a friend. And so I chose the latter. My flight was leaving out of Phoenix at like midnight. And so as I'm walking around the Phoenix airport, I look up at the board, and it was 11 o'clock at night. It was 111 degrees, which isn't unusual for Phoenix in July, which is when this photo was taken. But I looked down on the ground, and there was 11 cents laying on the ground. But it doesn't stop there. I got to Miami, and that's where we were meeting our friend. And I was sitting there talking with my friend and telling about the ones and how often I'm seeing them and the fact that I just found the 11 cents. And as I'm telling my friend this, I look down and there's a penny on the floor under the empty chair across from us. So I dive in and I grab the penny and I said, wouldn't it be cool if I found a dime before we get on the airplane? Sure enough, we were standing in line to board the plane, and I'm walking onto the plane, and there is a shiny dime laying on the floor. I'm like, holy cow, that's 2 days in a row. So now we get to St. Martin. We're doing a tour around St. Martin, and we went to this old, like plantation type house. And walking through the dirt parking lot, I look down and I see something that's round. It's all dirty, but I look and it's a penny. I pick it up. I'm like, holy cow, I found another penny. Wouldn't it be cool if I found another dime before the day is over? And sure enough, several hours later, we were walking to dinner and there was a shiny dime laying up against the road. I almost got hit by a car because I dove down to pick it up and there was a car passing by at the exact same time. But there I was in St. Martin, and 3 days in a row, I found 11 cents. Is that a coincidence or was that a sign? Let's talk a little bit about feathers. Before I left Phoenix, every once in a while I would find a feather laying on the welcome mat right outside my door. And, I knew that that was a sign, but I kind of thought maybe this is just a coincidence. But here's something really cool that happened. I was in Daytona Beach, Florida, and I was walking on the beach one day and I saw a feather, which isn't unusual. There were thousands of birds around, but most of the feathers were pretty dilapidated because the waves rush over them during high tides. But I looked down and I saw this pristine feather, and I was like, just thinking, that's interesting. This is like the first really nice feather that I have found on the beach. And I had this little voice in my head that just said, look up. And so there's the feather on the beach. And when I looked up, there's the feather in the sky. How cool is that? And then the next day, I was loading up my car. I was leaving. My car was parked in a parking structure on the basement floor. And it's not open to the outside. As I walked to my car, guess what I saw? I saw another feather laying on the ground right in front of my car. So my question to you, is that a coincidence or was that a sign? These next two are going to be really bizarre. And again, you're definitely going to want to stay to the end and hear the story of the duck. But the next one is electronic equipment turning on and off. John had a digital clock radio that was sitting next to him in the seat where he normally sat when we watched TV. Do you remember back in the days? Put in the comments if you remember back in the days. The digital things where the little numbers would flip down? That's how old this thing was. And he only used it for telling time. It wasn't tuned to a radio. But about a week after John passed away, I swear every time I walked by that stupid radio, it would turn on and it was just static. And that was actually really annoying. And so I threw that one away. And this was before I had made the decision to be a nomad. And I bought just a digital clock that I could set in its place. So that was one of the electronic stories that I have. But this one here is really bizarre. About 6 months before John passed away, the lights in the family room flickered 3 times, and I could hear a noise in the light switch. He had switched out the light switch to be controlled, like Alexa, turn on the lights. Well, you have to replace the light switch for it to do that. So when the lights flickered 3 times, I turned to John and I said, what was that all about? I heard it in the light switch. Do you think there's something in the wiring? And we didn't really have any conversation about it. He's like, I don't know. And I assumed that he would have fixed it. He never told me he did. There was just never any more discussion about it. And it never happened again until after he passed away. If you have been in a situation where you have lost your spouse or your loved one, you know that sleep eludes us. And I was completely unable to fall asleep. And so quite often I would sit in the family room. It was a comfortable reclining chair. And as I was watching a YouTube video about Lake Mead, because that's where John wanted his ashes to be, I'm watching this video about Lake Mead, and the overhead lights flickered 3 times. And I heard it in the light switch. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's weird. I looked at the clock. It was, I don't know, it was like maybe 12:30 in the morning, and didn't think much about it. The next night, I'm laying in bed watching part 2 of this 2-part thing on Lake Mead, because Lake Mead at the time was running out of water. And the lamp next to my bed flickered on and off 3 times. And that went on for months. It didn't matter if I was in the family room or if I was in bed, but sometime every single morning between midnight and 1 a.m., it was never at the same time, or I would have recorded it. It's never at the same time, but the lights would flicker 3 times. And it would be, I could hear it in the, it would wake me up if I was sleeping in the family room. And if I didn't turn the lights off, they just turned themselves off completely after about 5 minutes. It was almost like I was feeling a sign. It's like, it's time to go to bed, Debbie, you need to go to sleep. And so is that a coincidence? Or is there an explanation why lights would flicker 3 times in 2 separate rooms? Okay, it's time to talk about the duck. And those of you who are watching this video who were following me on Facebook after John's passing are going to recognize this story. And I don't tell it very often because it's the one thing that kind of still triggers me. And hopefully I'll get through this story on this video. John in his office had several stuffed animals sitting on a credenza. And most of the animals, like there was a tiger and there was a duck, and if you push the animal's paw or foot or whatever, it would make noise or play a song or whatever. There was a duck sitting there that would, I think it would quack. Oh, McDonald had a farm. I don't know what it quacks, but about 6 months before John passed away, this duck would quack every single time John moved in his chair, whether he sat down, stood up, moved around. And I asked him one day, like, John, why does this duck keep quacking? And he's like, I guess it's just static electricity. And I would just giggle. Like all throughout the day, I could hear the duck quacking. And just one quack, I'd hear the duck quacking from the other room. And this went on for months, and it just became the joke. You know, I heard the duck quack all day long. You must have been in and out of your office today. After John passed away, I had to go into his office and I needed to clean everything out, bring all the files over to my office. And I was sitting in his office chair wearing jeans just like he wore. And I was sitting down, standing up, moving around, and the duck never quacked. I'm like, I don't get it. Why did the duck quack all day long when John sat here, but the duck doesn't quack when I sit here? And I didn't really think a whole lot of it, but when John's son came to collect a lot of John's belongings and childhood memories, I said to his son, you know, you can go through the garage, you can go through the house, anything that has childhood memories, take it, it's yours. And when it came to the credenza, I said, you can take all the stuffed animals off the credenza except for the duck. And I told him the story about how the duck had been quacking up until the day John died, and it hadn't quacked since. And I said, I want to hear this duck quack one more time. I'm going to start to get misty-eyed now. I want to hear this duck quack one more time. And so a week later, I picked up John's ashes and I brought his ashes home, and they were sitting on my lap. And I was just in tears, distraught. My beautiful husband is now in this cardboard box because he wanted his ashes spread. And I just sat there and just experienced the pain of having your husband sitting in your lap in a box. And then I had to think of, where am I going to put this box? And I had removed all the triggers from the house. It's like, if I was going to have a good cry, it's because I chose to have a good cry, not because I walked in where all of John's clothes were hanging and I know that he's no longer there. So now I have to think about, where am I going to put this box? And I thought, I don't want to see the box every day. And then I thought, well, I'll put the box in our spare guest room. And I thought, well, that doesn't work because if there's a guest staying there, they're not going to want to see on the side of the box it says human remains. And so I decided to put the box in John's office. But by this time, I hadn't been in his office for over a week. Like, I had done all I needed to do in there, and I just closed the door and I never went in his office. And so I opened the door, and the duck was the only thing sitting on the credenza. And I put the box on the credenza, and I set the duck on top of John's ashes, and the duck quacked one time. And so that's why I took out my selfie stick. And this picture, I am laughing my head off because we get to choose our thoughts. And I went from being completely distraught to feeling like I had just gotten a communication. And so with that, I do believe that we can get communication from beyond. And for those of you who absolutely not, it's not possible, no way, no how, here's something that I would offer to you is, what if it's not? What if all of us who believe that we do get communications from the other side, what if it isn't true? Here's the thing, it brings us comfort. And so if you have a loved one who is going through grief, if you yourself are going through grief and you start to see the feathers, the ones, the multiple numbers, whatever those numbers are, or you have electronic things that are turning off and on, if you have any of these things that happen, and once again, I invite you to put your experience down in the comments. But even if it's not real, it's okay. It brings comfort. It's one of those things that maybe your awareness to things are heightened in a way that our subconscious mind can say, notice this and get comfort from it. It's not like one's magically appeared or pennies magically appeared or anything magically happens. It's just an awareness is raised so that we can express gratitude for what we are seeing. I hope that this video has been helpful. I hope it's been insightful. And once again, I do invite you to follow along with me on this journey through grief, through my travels around the world, and some of the different adventures. I don't usually cry, but I've kind of put off doing this video because I knew I would. So with that, have an absolutely wonderful day. I wish you all the best, and we'll see you in the next video. Wait a minute, I'm back one more time. Guess what is riding around with me in the car? I've got my duck, and everything I own fits in this little, I think it's a 4x3x4 storage container in Phoenix or in the trunk of my car. But you can bet I will always make room for this duck. Bye.